Hi, I'm Belle Loeffeler. I am from Cheyenne, Wyoming, and representing the Collegiate Farm Bureau team of Sheridan College. I believe that this is a very important issue, and I'm so excited to discuss about it today, as energy is one of our largest exports in Wyoming, and I believe that we are one of the largest energy export states in the United States, and we also need to learn how we can prioritize our state's largest export and source of income, but also prioritize the stability and the protection of our farmers and ranchers and private property owners.
Hi, I'm Tagg Mickelson. I am from Wyoming, Wyoming, and I am an active member of Sheridan's Farm Bureau Collegiate team. I am super excited to be discussing this topic today with my committee members here. This is an ongoing issue. 50 plus years of energy sources and maintaining agricultural land. This is such a broad topic too. There's so many different ways this road can go. There's so many different solutions. There's so many different ideas. And I'm so happy to discuss these ideas with my peers here, and I'm ready to find a solution for these problems. Thank you.
Farmers and ranchers are facing electric bills that soar into the thousands. With rising energy costs and Wyoming's energy resources, how do we balance the need for increased energy without infringing on private property rights or sacrificing valuable agricultural land? This could look like leveraging existing resources or helping with different energy production programs within our legislation already. I look forward to our discussion about how the Farm Bureau can act before the situation becomes a national crisis.
My name is Meagan Sagner, and I'm from Chugwater, Wyoming, representing the Sheridan College Collegiate Farm Bureau team. Energy will always be a hot topic in agriculture, from the grassroots level of Wyoming to the National American Farm Bureau level, and it is important to keep up to date with the ever-changing government regulations, such as House Bill 91. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
You've heard the opening statements. Competitors, please direct your open discussion to your fellow panel members now.
So, Meagan, you said something about House Bill 91. Could you go into a little bit of depth about that?
Absolutely. I am so glad you asked. So House Bill 91 is currently in Wyoming legislature. It recently passed through the Wyoming House on January 17th, looking to repeal the ability for private entities such as Western Midstream to use eminent domain when looking at energy collector systems. So if this goes on, it'll go into Senate, and then if it goes all the way through, this will go into effect July 1st of 2025.
I'm glad you brought up eminent domain. Eminent domain is such a deep topic too, and a lot of it goes to just protecting the personal private rights. No rancher or farmer wants to be told that you have to let us come through to put these wind turbines in, to put these solar farms in. Absolutely no one wants that. I sure as heck don't want that either. But when it comes to eminent domain, if they're trying to lobby for this through these wind farms and solar farms, I think it's important to get the backing of the Farm Bureau, to get to state legislators, to get to those national legislators, and bring the government together and say, hey, if they're going to come through our property without us getting a say in it, we want something in return for it. We want some cash for it, and it's not just cash too. If wind turbines coming in or solar panels, let us tap into your energy a little bit. Let us be able to power our house, be able to power our equipment, and keep our farms and ranches going steadily, and not let this just be you guys just get your one-way ticket to money.
Tagg, I'm really glad that you brought up eminent domain. That is something that no landowner wants to hear from anyone at all. Personally, my grandma's ranch was split up by an eminent domain, and they put a highway right through the middle of it, so that's something that lies very near and dear to my heart. And I think kind of moving forward in this discussion, and some things that those opening statements of you guys all kind of mentioned is different prices in energy production and kind of how that looks for different farmers and ranchers. Wyoming is a huge state for energy production, whether it be natural resources that we already have or even renewable energy that we can use, such as wind or solar energy. I mean, there's huge wind farms everywhere in Wyoming as well. So I'd love to hear you guys kind of talk a little bit about it, whether it be renewable energy or some different energy exports that we have going on in our state currently that can really help farmers and ranchers.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Courtney. I believe that, yes, Wyoming is a large export for energy in the United States. and one of our biggest ones is the oil that we produce. Our president, who's going into office coming in January of this year, he is saying, drill, baby, drill. This is something that our past president has kind of neglected, and I believe that this is a great way that for Wyoming to move forward with for our income, and not alone that. Wind farms are massive. We have a wind farm that stretches from the base of the ending of Cheyenne to the start of a state park, Kurt Gowdy. And they are large and they take up a lot of land. While oil fields, they also are big, but they have a lot less land that they are being used, and that it can be used a lot easier than just wind farms.
And coming off of like energy sources like coal or fossil fuels, but also coming off from renewable energy sources, I think together we need to diversify our portfolio of energy sources. We need all the energy we can get, but we need to find the balance between what's the right amount of fossil fuels we can use and what's the right amount of renewable energy sources like wind and solar. We need to be able to come together. We need to sit down. We need to get together with these companies, these big wind farms and solar companies, and say, hey, we have land for this, but we also need to use our fossil fuels as well and not just renewable resources. We can't completely cut out fossil fuels.
Belle, I like that you bring up the exporting side of it. And I think one of the big things that is kind of a focus right now is bringing energy production back into domestic energy production. Right now, there's a lot of import and not using American energy and not using Wyoming's energy. And we can all agree that Wyoming is one of the largest energy producing states. And so when you get into the exporting side of it, we want to be cautious with exporting. How do you think that, Belle, how do you think that Farm Bureau can help with regulating how much is exported while also maintaining a balance of using domestic energy?
I think that Farm Bureau can really work with their lawyers that they have, not only to help with the export of energy, but also on the ranching and farming side of it and private property rights of this. They can help farmers and ranchers write easements so that these farmers and ranchers are getting compensation for the land that is being used, or the roads that are being used, or having these oil fields or wind turbine companies coming in and using their roads and having them compensate for that amount. Because farmers and ranchers need every money that they can, every income that they can get. Farmers and ranchers do not make a lot of money, and when they do, it just goes straight back into their production, so there's not much left for them to have a comfortable living.
Jumping right off of that, Belle, and kind of your mention about those easements that you can use with those bigger corporations. I had a really great conversation a few months ago with a lawyer. His name was Connor Nicholas, who had a lot of familiarity with that type of thing, especially with private property rights and landowners with those easements. And really what they're finding nowadays with those easements and those big corporations coming in, they're trying to take away those private property rights and say, hey, you have to do this for us. This is what we signed the easements. And he was really discussing and explaining to me and how Farm Bureau can utilize those lawyers that have those resources and those access already to see how those big corporations are trying to infiltrate those private property rights of landowners, and how those landowners need to really work out the specifics of different things within their agreements and their easements, and how moving forward, that has actually ended up hurting some different landowners. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think moving into that different thing with how can landowners kind of help out as well is landowner groups. This is a great opportunity for landowners to be able to utilize their resources within each other to be able to discuss and protect themselves together as well. So I'd really love to hear you guys' your different perspectives on how landowner groups can really help utilize those different protection for private property rights.
I like that you bring that up because we have had personal issues running into private properties. We have had drilling companies come in and drill on our ranch in southeast Wyoming. And it's kind of a double-edged sword for us because they came in and they made a very nice, well-maintained road running right through our property. Our property, however, though, is checkerboarded private and public lands. So that's where it kind of runs from a public policy, public lands issue into private lands, because with that, we have run into issues with trespassing, with hunting. They take that road thinking that it is a public road when it is just run through this company and onto our lands. So yes, we get a very nice, well-maintained road that gives us access to that end of our ranch, but then we run into issues with trespassing and private land rights. And I think with your comment on the landowner groups, that's a great way to kind of connect, and we can use Farm Bureau as kind of a way to bridge that and bring landowners together to form those groups. So I'm really glad, Courtney, that you brought up the idea of landowner groups.
I as well like the idea of landowner groups. I think getting in contact with the Farm Bureau and being able to create these landowner groups and be able to advocate, hey, we got a lot of people out there that are dealing with these problems. Let's get together and let's try to find common solutions. And I think being part of these landowner groups, a lot of it is talking about being how to be a steward of the land. How are we going to protect our own private land, the lands that we devote our lifetimes to, ranching and farming in our production operation. I think it's just a good idea to keep in mind too, how are we going to keep these lands the same? How are we going to protect our rangelands from these big energy sources? How are we going to keep from giant wind turbines coming in, going through our pastures? How are we going to keep transmission lines from coming in and tearing up our pastures? How are we going to keep solar panels from breaking up our pastures? So I think going through with this landowner idea is a good idea, and just being good stewards of the land.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Tagg, about where land is going to be going. My personal family farm in Nebraska, the Lee brothers' land, the last Lee brother has unfortunately passed away, so that land has been divided up amongst the children. And almost all the kids decided that they were going to sell that pieces of land. And a large companies of the wind farms have come in offering to buy that land. And we have tried to look into different places because we want that land to be farmed and cultivated and used for its true value and not just be putting wind turbines on. And so we had a group from the Mennonite Church come to us and offer us $84 million to start farming and cultivating that land. And I think that's something that could bridge the gap with Farm Bureau. They could potentially come in and find these buyers who are wanting to really value the land instead of almost not destroying it, but using it for a different source.
100%, Belle, and I think another way we can do that is lobbying through Farm Bureau to the government. Government subsidies just provide these wind farms and solar farms money to help go through the loopholes and to be able to get onto prime farm ground. Going through prime farm ground, you don't have to go through environmental impact studies. Instead of using the wide open prairie where you're not going to be farming, grazing is limited. But to go through that with putting wind turbines and solar panels up there on the bluffs and on open prairie ground is you have to go through environmental impact studies. Therefore, instead of using all these government subsidies to write these ranchers a check that is almost impossible to say no to, a check that could change their life forever and they won't have to work another day in their life, I think we should use that money instead to do these environmental impact studies on the open prairie ground. A lot of it too is just looking for Native American artifacts and just simple stuff like that, looking for minerals and oils and where you can or cannot build. I think we should use more government subsidy money to go through with environmental impact studies on land that is unfit for irrigation and farming and running cattle. And I think through Farm Bureau, we can lobby for that in the government and say, let's use this money where it's going to be the best fit for these transmission lines, wind turbines, solar farms, instead of using prime farm ground that people base their life on.
Tagg, I like that you bring up the lobbying because American Farm Bureau actually supports the Renewable Fuel Standards 2, which was accepted in 2007 under a natural resources and energy umbrella that works with refineries and natural resource producers to kind of control the capacity that is being pulled out when they are harvesting and going through those renewable resources. So I really like that you bring up the lobbying side because I think Farm Bureau they have a voice in the government for ranchers and farmers, and I think that is a huge part of it because sometimes you get ranchers and farmers. I know personally in my family, none of my family is going to go into legislature and talk, but they will go to their local Farm Bureau, local governments, and talk to them about different changes in energy and what can be done and going on with that because you're right, there's a lot that comes with energy and harvesting those energies and how farmers and ranchers can approach those working with those companies. So I really like you bring that up.
And I like the idea of going to your local Farm Bureau too. I think that really sparks the flame to bring it to the state legislature, to bring it to your state Farm Bureau, to bring it to the National Farm Bureau organization. I think it's good as ranchers and farmers together to come together through Farm Bureau to voice their opinions and to get their voices heard out there to the national level, federal level, state level.
I really like that you bring that up, Tagg, and I think that really highlights the grassroots policy development impact that Farm Bureau has, where we're doing this discussion meet together and we can discuss this moving forward, and it can work up to the state and even national legislation perhaps. Different things that we talked about. You kind of mentioned using money to do environmental impact things as an alternative to maybe doing some renewable energy resource things. And I think another really great option could be some different carbon sequestration projects as well. Those are still energy that can be used in our environment, and that's something that moving forward is going to become a very hot topic. So I'd really love to hear your opinion, Belle, on some things that could be moving forward, something with carbon sequestration with our environment and how different people are wanting to see that happen.
I do like that you brought that up. Carbon sequestration is something that is new and upcoming and that not a lot of people know about. It's something that is so not known, and people really need to need to know about this because it is something that could bring in a lot of income for farmers and ranchers, as well as help these companies that are emitting large quantities of CO2 into the atmosphere. There are certain plants, certain different types of trees, different varieties of plants. Specifically, hemp in particular is the most carbon sequestering plant out there. It can sequester 5 tons more carbon than trees can in 1 acre than it can in 10 acres of trees. I believe that being able to grow hemp, or even just a small patch of hemp, and being able to get those carbon credits from companies, not only like United Airlines, but also the wind turbine companies or oil field companies that are emitting those CO2 credits into the atmosphere, that could not only help the carbon emissions in the world, but also could very much help farmers and ranchers.
And I think branching off of that a little bit, within CO2 emissions, ranchers and farmers get a bad rap a lot. The general population doesn't understand that ranchers and farmers are a leading performance factor of reducing carbon emissions. Everyone says, and they don't understand, but everyone says, your big tractors are producing so much CO2 in the air. Your cow farms, as silly as it sounds, is producing CO2 emissions in the air. I think going through Farm Bureau and advocating what ranching and farming is really doing is a lot better for the planet. And just growing crops, producing fresh oxygen, taking that CO2 and turning it into oxygen is part of the plant growth. So I think just going through Farm Bureau and to advocate and to just talk about to the general population and make aware of the true pros of farming and ranching, and that it's not just emitting a bunch of CO2 gases into the air.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, Tagg. Another thing that Farm Bureau does is they help fund the stuff for soil testing for that carbon emissions. And I think that having Farm Bureau help even more with being able to gain those carbon credits through large companies, maybe being a middleman that where they communicate between those companies and these farmers and ranchers within Wyoming, as well as help it continuing to help with the soil testing and funding that. That is something that can also really help farmers really just keep their heads above water.
So we've come up with a lot of great ideas of how energy can be harnessed and how it can be used. But I think one of the biggest issues that farmers and ranchers see with these energy productions and energy companies is the loss of agricultural land. It's really a give and take sort of approach. You have to give up some of your land for the mining, for the wind turbines, any of that. And if you look at it like in mining reclamation, whether it be coal or lithium, part of mining reclamation, the requirements is it has to be grazable land. So if you were to work a way that you could look at it for mining and how Farm Bureau can kind of work with the farmers and ranchers and the mining companies is to when those mining companies are done and they're ready to start the reclamation process, if they give back a little extra land to those farmers and ranchers to graze and kind of work it as a partnership. I mean, ag is all about working together. And so if you can give that opportunity and where Farm Bureau could come in and maybe help kind of mitigate that and work with those energy companies, mining companies, and farmers and ranchers. Courtney, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Meagan. I really appreciate that. And mining is something that really is a big deal. And moving forward, not only making those different companies and those different corporations that are using your land for their personal benefit, and they're going to make you pay, they're going to have the payment given to you after. I think also just making sure that they are following through with what they originally signed on the lease with. It's really hard as a landowner. You feel like you're standing alone against this giant corporation. And if they start shoving things down your throat that, no, we did not sign that. No, we're not going to make sure that we're reclaiming the land. Or we're only going to do 3 years instead of 5 years. You have to really stand up for yourself. And that also highlights the importance of Farm Bureau acting as a liaison between those landowners and also people that have experience with that, such as different lawyers or firms or even landowner groups as well. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that and brought that up.
And coming back to you, Meagan, with the mining, in the Reclamation Acts and getting to be able to graze that land again. After a coal mine comes in or these big mines come in and they replant this grasses, I think it's really important to be able to make sure that these leases on grounds that have been disturbed and replanted with grass, they're never going to be the same as they were before. So I think lowering leases for lands like that is going to be a huge help to ranchers and farmers as they can more easily finance, access that land. And just being able to go through Farm Bureau and get these finances and loans they'll need for smaller leases as well, that's a way bigger impact for their bank account than having to lobby for way bigger loans that could hurt their price check and take years to pay off versus lesser leases on lands that have been disturbed by energy sources.
I believe that's a great point, Tagg. Another thing that I feel like that we could go and Farm Bureau can help with is by utilizing those energy sources that are coming onto our land. A senator was denied, oil rig came onto his property and was asking if they could put an oil rig on his property and give him compensation, but he also asked if he could use that power that is being sourced from his property to power his house, to power his barns, and he was denied that right. And so I believe that if we can go through Farm Bureau and use Farm Bureau to help fight for that right, that'd be a great thing that a Farm Bureau and ranchers and farmers can excel from.
And as Meagan said earlier, it's a cooperative group. The ag industry and the energy industry, together we have to stand together. We have to cooperate with each other. This can't be a battle that goes on forever. It's been a war long enough on who gets what land, who gets to decide where these wind turbines, oil fields, solar farms go. We have to stand together and we have to make sure it's clear what our opinions are, what our beliefs are, and what we want out of the both trade. I hate to hear about this senator that was denied access to be able to tap into power resources. I think that's a great way to be able to contribute to each other's causes. You come through my land, I expect a little bit of help from you too. Cash only goes so far in a ranching and farming production, as in because it just goes straight back into the market, straight back into bettering their herd, bettering their equipment, bettering their crops. How about we get a little bit of power from you? Let us power our houses, our barns, and we can even do a little bit of that ourselves too as ranchers and farmers. We can switch into using LED lights and just be more energy efficient. So I think that's a great way that we can stand together and be able to use each other, flow with each other, play with each other.
Yeah, Tagg, I really like that you bring that up. There's a lot of challenges that come with this. There's one thing that I do want to touch on. Courtney, you had mentioned earlier that your family's land was broke up due to discrepancies and disagreements. I kind of want to get an understanding of what you think Farm Bureau could have done maybe, or how your family could have gone through Farm Bureau to help avoid that, because we see a lot of these operations breaking up, and that's not something we want to see in agriculture. So I want to kind of pick your brain on seeing what you think on that.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. So, like I said, eminent domain was the thing that really took us down. And the problem was, as a private landowner, we felt like we had no availability to be able to stand up for ourselves.
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask that the audience remain silent for 1 minute to aid the competitors in their preparation. Time. Please put down your pencils, and in voluntary order, please stand and share your 1 minute closing statement.
I'm Belle Loeffeler from Cheyenne, Wyoming, representing Sheridan College Collegiate Farm Bureau team. I think we had a great discussion today about how we can prioritize our energy outsource, but also prioritize our ranchers and farmers by using Farm Bureau as almost as like a middleman to help mitigate how much money is going into energy outsourcing. this conversation did a great thing to help us come up with ideas, whether that is land grazing, whether that's using carbon credits, or using Farm Bureau as the middleman to help not only our energy, but also our farmers and ranchers. I really appreciate this. Thank you all for your time.
Hi, I'm Tagg Mickelson from Wyoming, Wyoming, representing the Collegiate team from Sheridan College. I love this discussion. I love this topic. This topic is super important to every farmer and rancher around. The battle between farming, ranching, and energy sources is so crucial to the way we live today. We can't go out without electricity today. We can't go without food production today. And I think after all of our topics we came up with great solutions today. We talked over some great ideas and some opinions, and I value that deeply. And I think that going through with Farm Bureau, I think we need to stand up and use Farm Bureau as support to be able to support us in the battle with energy companies, whether we can work together. I think working together is the only way we can get through this, because together we stand and divided we fall. Thank you for this discussion and all the great ideas.
Once again, my name is Meagan Sagner from Chugwater, Wyoming, representing the Sheridan College Collegiate Farm Bureau team. And I think today's discussion brought a lot of different viewpoints. Belle, you talked a lot about how Wyoming is a huge exporting state in energy. Courtney, you talked a lot on the leveraging resource programs and the importance of following through with these industries. And Tagg, you brought the idea of we are stewards of the land, and I think that is huge. I think it's very important that we take advantage of the opportunities that we have through these energy companies, but also working with Farm Bureau. They are our voice in the legislature and working through government policies because it's ever changing. But I think it's huge that we stay up to date on what is going on and taking advantage of the opportunities that we have. I really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you.
I think we had a great discussion here today, and really were able to cover all bases of what this question was, with increasing energy prices, protecting agricultural land, and protecting private property rights. Some things that I really took away from it was using Farm Bureau as a resource, as a middleman for landowners and for people who are in bigger corporations, and utilizing those different legislative and lobbying aspects of it. Some other ideas that I took from it was maybe diversifying our energy resources that we're using, whether it be renewable energy or even natural gases that we already have within the state of Wyoming. And some other things that I took from you guys over here was maybe making sure that the domestic energy is coming back to us as farmers and ranchers. So some of these things going forward in the grassroots policy development, these are some ideas that the Farm Bureau can really take and run with and take it to the national level to make sure that energy production is going to remain on top of it and that it won't become a national crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.